webinar is actually being recorded and will be circulated to all of those who have registered to attend. I'd like to start today's presentation first with a huge thank you to many contributors who have been instrumental in shaping the Humanitarian AI Assistant. Your collective expertise and commitment have really been crucial in developing an AI solution that can meaningfully serve humanitarians and the critical work they do. My name is Mitali Iyengar, or Tali for short, and I'm the Director of Product and Programs at DataKind. DataKind is a global nonprofit organization where we collaborate with social sector organizations to develop sector-facing products that leverage data science and AI responsibly to advance our mutual commitment to building a more just world. Supporting this webinar are many of my colleagues, including folks from our technology, product, and community engagement teams. And as we go through the presentation, please do capture your questions in the Q&A section, which you'll find in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom or top of your screen. And together as a team, we will try to respond to them as they come up. I'm also really thrilled to welcome Roy, Tamara, John, and Jamie from Save the Children, our incredible partner in this incredible project. I'm just going to hand over to Jamie to tell us a little bit about Save the Children.
Thanks, Tali, and just echoing gratitude to everyone for being here today. So Save the Children is the world's first independent children's organization. We've been in existence for over 100 years and focus on making sure children have a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm every day, and particularly in times of crisis. So we operate in over 116 countries around the globe. And I really just want to highlight, we are this organization with a long history, a long legacy, over 100 years. We've been supporting children, but we're recognizing that there are technologies like AI and partners like DataKind. And as we move forward, we want to be the most effective organization possible and are so excited to be collaborating. Thanks, Tali.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you again to the SAFE team for being here. And the team is also here to support this presentation and respond to questions that you might have either for us as DataKind or to Save the Children as well. I'm going to kick off today's presentation with a recap of this project's background, followed by an overview of the Humanitarian AI Assistant tool, and of course, a demo. After that, I'd like to invite Roy and Tam to talk a little bit more about what's actually motivating them at Save International to explore this solution, what specific impact they aim to achieve going forward with a solution like this, and also to think a little bit about what are the considerations that they have top of mind when it comes to operationalizing an AI solution. And to close, I'm going to basically give you all the information you need for yourselves to access the Humanitarian AI Assistant, and we should also have a few minutes for Q&A at the end. All right, so just a bit of background, in the context of humanitarian work, as we all know, timely and decisive action is really critical for providing humanitarian relief, but it's also required for the planning and preparedness phases. For many organizations, during both of those phases and in the periods in between, finding and using the right data at the right time to do the right analysis or most meaningful analysis to inform decision-making has overall been a long-standing challenge that continues to need urgent attention. So to address that challenge, nearly 20 months ago, we joined forces with Save the Children with the support from Microsoft and GitHub to really dive in and figure out if we can do more with humanitarian data given new technologies and really transform that sense of data chaos into timely and actionable insights that can bolster the speed, scope, and impact of humanitarian response. And to that end, we launched the Humanitarian Data Insights Project. There are some links coming up in the chat as well for you to learn more about this project in your own time. The objectives were really to just dive in a bit deeper into, into that sense of data chaos and really understand what specifically were those pain points, what pain points did the community experience around data, and then start to explore, potential AI solutions. Another objective really was, once we got there and started to map some solutions out, to go ahead and develop one or even two solutions in a transparent, open source, and cost-effective or cost-conscious way from the get-go, such that these solutions can potentially be operationalized by any humanitarian organization. And so we committed to listening and learning and interrogating where AI could genuinely play a transformative role in improving the operational efficiency of humanitarian coordination and action. To start, we spent a couple of months doing user research, and actually we spoke to so many of you. We did interviews, we sent out surveys, and we did a ton of desk research as well to really dive into those data pain points and particularly try to understand which ones really impacted humanitarian response and coordination. There was a lot of variety, but key themes that emerged as the top priority were really around data interoperability. So the ability to bring together small amounts of data from multiple sources to create a common picture of needs and response. And also around data literacy. So really enabling and empowering more people to find data, to know how to use that data effectively, and contribute to the analysis and the debate, and help people to make make sense of large flows of data to positively support decision making. In order to start thinking about potential generative AI solutions, we also had to consider that there's a spectrum of risk when it comes to the use of generative AI. Applications vary in terms of the risk that they present due to hallucination or bias, omission, rates of accuracy, and other factors around safety. So we really spent a considerable chunk of time learning about how we could, given the pain points that we had identified, target sort of solutions that are on the safer end, if you like, of the spectrum, that can really be supported with a solid framework for safety. And, the other thing is that the sector at large is, as you know, still working to establish the guardrails around the use of AI that really embed humanitarian values and principles. So I just want to call out here that from the onset, within the Humanitarian Data Insights project, we established a foundation of collaboration with a dedicated advisory group who have really been on this journey with us. Folks from Catholic Relief Services, Mercy Corps, Norwegian Refugee Council, and the HDX team over at the Center for Humanitarian Data at OCHA, and all chaired by this team here from Save the Children. You have been with us for the last year, and really helped to guide us. You've learned alongside with us, and you've also shared your perspectives with others across the community over the past year. This group, along with consultants from across the tech and humanitarian community, were really instrumental in shaping a set of core principles to underpin the way we would do research, design, and development of AI solutions within this project for humanitarian action and response. We actually really couldn't have learned a thing without the guidance from our advisory group. So I just want to give out an extra special thanks and a shout out to them at this point. We learned a lot about what it takes to operationalize solutions. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't enough with it, of a goal to just put together a prototype, but we really wanted that prototype to be poised to be implemented at a production level, to be taken up by individual organizations if they so wish, or for it to become a production-grade digital public good available to multiple organizations. So that was a key part of our learning as well, to think about what requirements needed to be satisfied in order to operationalize a large language model solution. And so as we developed the sort of matrix of options to consider, and consider which solutions we should advance into development, Frankly, what we learned was that not all of the pain points that we had identified, as far as we could tell, could be meaningfully solved with generative AI. But there were some really promising opportunities. And that's how we came to advancing the conversational data analysis solution as a product that can be operationalized and scaled by any humanitarian organization. And that brings me to our tool, our conversational data analysis tool that we've called the Humanitarian AI Assistant. This is a tool for individuals and organizations to discover, explore, and get insights from their data in plain language. The goal here is to ensure that anyone without extensive technical data query or programming language can intuitively and quickly retrieve information and tailor information displays according to their needs, such as in graphs or table or as maps, and really just reduce the time, effort, and overhead that's required to produce data products and insights that are required both for internal decision-making, debate, as well as for external coordination during humanitarian response. Before I go into showing you a little bit more about the tool, I did want to just highlight a couple of key notices for you. First of all, a data notice. For this release of the Humanitarian AI Assistant, it's publicly accessible, right? We chose to ingest the publicly available humanitarian data sets from HDX's HAPI API, which was released in June 2024. What this means is that for now, you will only be able to access that ingested data on this public site. It is designed so that if you were to deploy it on your local environment, you could use other data sets. There are APIs that adhere to the Open API standard can be added through configuration. But on this public site, the data will be updated in upcoming phases of development, but for now, it's just the data from June 2024. The second notice is just to let you know that this is a beta version, which means it's really being shared publicly to gather user feedback and identify improvements. We've thoroughly tested the application, but you may still encounter some bugs. This version is really designed for evaluation, and therefore the outputs should not be used for real-world decision-making, mission-critical operations, or in any sort of professional application. So when you get to the Humanitarian AI Assistant, you'll be greeted by this homepage. It's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. As you can see on the top right, you'll see a menu. There's the home button really just brings you back to this homepage that has all the notices. It has the welcome message as well as the beta version notice. If you click on the Humanitarian AI Assistant, that will actually take you to it'll invite you to launch the conversational agent in a new tab. FAQs, lots of information there for you, including everything that I'm covering here and more. And finally, data recipes, which is the core and underlying innovation of this solution, and actually what I'm going to give you a quick overview of in a minute. Every page on this website has links to the privacy policy, terms of service, and license, should you wish to explore those, as well as a floating feedback button, which you can click on at any time to report an issue or just share your feedback or just send us a message. It's just a super simple form, and you can also provide a file or an image if it helps to explain your feedback. So as I mentioned, when you click on the Humanitarian AI Assistant at the top right over there, you'll be invited to launch the conversational agent. When you click on that, you'll be directed to this sign-in page. The application requires authentication via a Microsoft or Google account at this time. So it's just a single sign-on option. Just decide if you want to proceed with your Microsoft or Google credentials and log in. Once you're in, the conversational AI interface will look quite familiar to you. It's like many others, albeit a much simpler version than what you're probably used to at this point. What you'll find is there's a text input field for where you can sort of type your messages. There is a send button icon, which you can click, or you can just press enter to send a message. On the left side is a message history display where your chat history is logged. And then there's also an icon on the top right to start a new conversation or a fresh chat. And your profile picture is where you'll basically go to access a couple of simple account settings. Now that was the front end. And before I get to doing a demo and just showing you a little bit more of, how it works and just and some of those quirks that I promised I'll show you, I just want to orient you a little bit to what's happening on the back end. Given the developing nature of this technology, our approach really focuses on using LLMs in an assisted manner to generate data insights rather than solely relying on large language model outputs. So transparency is essential for any generated insights, and we really want to ensure that people are able to basically see what data was used to generate the insight and how the insight was arrived at. To this end, as I mentioned, the core innovation of the solution lies in the concept of data recipes, where instead of asking the LLM to analyze the data for you, we focus on using the LLM's capabilities to generate code to perform that analysis, which is then validated by a human-in-the-loop review before being published to a library, where it is then available for end users to use. By building a library, certain risks of using LLMs are reduced because data recipes are set so that they can get you the same result every time and can be reviewed to ensure that the answer is right. It's a way of using the sort of power of LLMs in a safer and more cost-effective way. So you might wonder, in this public version, if you're the user, who is generating the recipes? Well, the recipes are generated by what we call a recipes admin. And on this publicly hosted prototype of the Humanitarian AI Assistant, DataKind is the recipes admin. We use a recipes AI assistant that actually uses a large language model to convert questions about data into code to generate insights. The code and the results are then reviewed by us before being saved to a recipe server or a library. And once they're approved, they're deployed onto the front end, where they're then available for you to use. So the front end LLM will check whether a user's prompt matches an existing recipe in the library, and if so, the actual recipe is executed and the results are shown to the user. To view the sort of, if you want to have a look at what recipes you can test, you can navigate to, I mentioned that top right menu, to the data recipes at the top of the web page, but you can also ask for all recipes in your chat interface. So with that, I think I'll get into the demo of the Humanitarian AI Assistant and try that out. So I have already logged in, and I'm going to click here to deploy my conversational assistant on a new tab. All right, we'll start with then show all recipes. I'm doing this demo live, so it's always nerve-wracking, and hopefully everything works smoothly. You'll see very quickly that typically you're probably used to, I don't know if you are, but I'm certainly used to being a lot more chatty, polite, conversational. Please, can you show me? And thank you very much for your response. But I think you will find as you use this prototype, that for the testing here, the main thing is really just to get to the question that you want as quickly as possible. So that's why don't mind me being a little curt with our humanitarian AI response. Data recipes you'll see are of two types. Here I have the list of all the recipes that are currently available to use. We have something called these recipes. These are generic skills which can be run when a requested scenario is, you want to run the scenario, but you want to change out the country or the data set. But the essential way in which the analysis is done, the code is a generic skill. The other sort of type of recipe, if you like, is a memory. This is when within sessions you start to generate some memories. And so if you come in and you ask the same question over and over again, what can happen is it gets stored as a memory. And so if you ask the exact question in precisely the same way, it might pull on a memory for you. The next obvious question that you might want to ask is, what data sets do you have access to? It can be quite forgiving of typos, as well as, if you make any mistakes with like spaces and so on. And as you can see here, it's pulled out for me the data sets that I have access to. And all of the data right now is from the HAPI data set. So we have quite a few types of data. I can see here that we have some coordination and operational presence data. So what I'm going to do now is start to ask, just to show you a few questions about how to get some insights. I've actually, just to save time, I've copied a list of questions that I want to ask. So I'm going to be copy pasting rather than typing everything out, just in the interest of time. So right now here, I'm asking for a table of, operational presence. So organizations that are working in Nigeria by sector. And here I get a long list, a really long list, which makes sense. So to simplify, what I might do is actually just maybe ask for a bar chart instead. So you will see when a recipe is generated, a badge system indicates whether a human has approved a recipe, therefore it's available to you. This just indicates to me that the analysis, I can actually trust the way in which this analysis has been done. And when a human has approved it, you can actually get to see the source of the data itself. So I can click in here, for instance, and it will take me to the data set, in this case on HDX, the Nigeria Operational Presence data set. And if I wanted, I can also download the raw data here. The other feature I wanted to show you is once you've generated some kind of a visual or a infographic, you can actually just click on that and it can download the infographic for you. And I've done this a number of times so that I can use those in things like presentations. All right, so another question I have here, now I've got sort of the summary of operational presence in Nigeria, but maybe I want to find out which specific regions in Nigeria we have data for. In the event that a recipe doesn't exist, the LLM will basically write the code itself to try and perform the task. It is sometimes up to the assistant to decide whether it will actually show you the code it wrote to perform the task. In this case, right now, it doesn't show me the code that it put together, but in other sessions when I've tried it, actually, it actually gives me the SQL query that it wrote in order to give me this result. Now, okay, so let me try then to get more detailed information about organizations that are working in Borno, and try that out. Okay, so it is able to also give me, I can go in and look at operational presence in a more detailed way at admin level 1 level. Now, for the sake of expediency, I just want to point out an interesting little quirk. Now, if you find that the way you've asked the question doesn't quite work, it doesn't produce an output for some reason, or doesn't understand what you're asking, I just want to note that you can always look at the way the recipes are written and go through and see if there's a recipe that might match what information you're trying to get. Maybe you want to plot a bar chart of humanitarian organizations by sector. You want to create a map of the number of organizations in a particular sector at either admin 1 or 2 for a particular country. I just want to show you that there is this option as well that you can actually see if there are recipes available that you can already use rather than trial and error to arrive at a human-approved recipe. All right. I'm also going to try and ask. There's a recipe that I have actually copied here that I'm going to bring here. As you can see, this is a slightly convoluted recipe in the way that it's written. And that is for a reason that I just want to share. I'm just going to put in here that I want to see a map of the population of Nigeria by admin level 1. Now, the recipe here that I've used does say something like using happy data as an image. This is another one of those quirks that sometimes the tool's ability to interpret a user's prompt to match it to an existing recipe is an area that I would say continues to need more development and optimization. We need to improve the tool's capability to actually take the intention of what a person's asking in that plain natural language and match it to an existing recipe. And that is why, if something, like I said, if it doesn't work right off the bat, I do recommend trying to use sort of the language of the recipe, the way it's written, the way I've written it over here, to get you a better result. Okay, so I've managed to see here, again, I can go to the source. Clearly, this tells me I have shapefiles for Nigeria as well in there. So I can also have a look at, if I want to get into a slightly different type of analysis, I can start to ask about whether I can see where there are internally displaced populations and what data is available here on this map. Again, it's another one of those convoluted prompts, but again, I'm doing that to ensure I get the result every time. So as you can see, I get some data labels. I can see here that IDPs are, we have data about IDPs in 3 locations. Now, I mentioned that that recipes are these generic skills which can be sort of changed to a different scenario. So for example, to illustrate that, I'm now going to ask about the same question, but this time for Mozambique, and see whether I get a result. This time I'm looking for a map of Mozambique that shows me the label of locations within Mozambique where there are displaced populations, and that works as well. So just to show you this, when I created the map of Nigeria here, if you click into the source, you should be guided to the data set where this information is contained for Nigeria. Whereas now, if I go into this, the same recipe that's being used, but I am now asking for Mozambique, it takes me to a different data set. All right. I also noticed while I was actually exploring the list of recipes available, another way to look at the internally displaced population information, as well as in the context of a country's population. So I'm now trying that recipe here to produce a bar chart. So this produces a bar chart for me. Well, the map above shows me that there are these 3 locations. It indicates to me that maybe the population of Cabo Delgado in the northeast of Mozambique has an overall lower population in terms of just overall millions than, let's say, Nampula. But the IDP population in Cabo Delgado here makes up nearly 35%, looks like, of the population in that region, as opposed to somewhere close to 17% in Nampula. Now I'm showing you this, all of these color schemes and everything else is something that if you were to deploy it locally for yourselves, everything here can be modified. The color, it can be basically modified to meet your organization's design requirements. Now, before I close the demo, I think I'm going to show you one last thing, one more map. And I'm going to actually switch countries again and go back, but I'm going to explore a different situation. And to do that, I'm going to start a fresh conversation. I'm doing this because you might have noticed when you use conversational agents, sometimes when a whole conversation has gotten too long and you've switched back and forth from different topics, it can impact the performance and optimization, optimal performance of your assistant. So just to show you, you can always go back to your history if you wanted to look at your history of conversations, which clearly right now is not, it is popping up. There you go. You can always go back to your history. So I'm going to go back and start a new chat. And all I want to say here is that I want to see a map of, again, I'm using the exact phrasing from the recipes list, just because I want to make sure that I get a result here. But I want to look at a map of Nigeria, of the population where we have where the population is in IPC phase 3. So IPC is a, as you know, classification of food insecurity. Again, you can see this. Yeah, if you're happy with the result, you can actually click to give your feedback. This worked. Great. Submit feedback. Or if it produces a result that you are not happy with or is incorrect, you can go ahead and provide feedback immediately within that conversation. So what I actually wanted to show you here is, just as before, we were able to apply the same recipe for a different country and get a result. There are times when you may not get a result, like in this case. Here, the recipe produced no output. It's not easy always to know, and I think this is over time as you get used to using the tool. It's not easy to know whether this is an error or not, but I just want to tell you that in this specific case, the reason this didn't work is because the data actually doesn't exist in that happy data set. We do not have the data that we have for Nigeria, for instance, for Mozambique. Though we have shape files, we do not have data about how much of the the population by admin 1 in IPC phase 3. But we do have data for Nigeria, and so we can carry on the analysis here. And here I'm going to ask it to list the top three states by population that are in IPC phase 3 plus in Nigeria. And could well be that right now it decides to be overwhelmed and not work. Okay. My point is, it keeps going. I will stop the demo at this point here and return back to the slides. And basically, I do have a recording of that just in case it was a backup. But what I really want to do at this point is actually stop and invite my team members and colleagues from Save the Children to offer some of their perspectives as well. So Roy and Tam, I'd love to invite you now. And I have a couple of questions for you. I'm going to stop screen share so we can actually have a chat with you. And I will ask you a little bit, as I mentioned, about sort of what's actually motivating you and your teams to explore this solution. So again, thanks very much, Roy and Tam, for joining. Roy, maybe we can start with you. You've seen the demo, you've seen what the potential is of the Humanitarian AI Assistant, and you've of course been on the journey with us from the get-go. So what is motivating your team and you at Save International to explore this solution?
I'll talk more probably on the technical side, the computer technical side, and Tam, I'm sure we'll talk more on the thematic side. But for us, when we look at use of data in Save the Children, the two of the biggest challenges we face are the complexity of our data and the availability of finding the data. And of course, those are related. But to give you an example of complexity, I just learned a stat 2 days ago, which shocked me, which is that we have currently about 9,000 Power BI dashboards operating in Save the Children International. And that happens because we have so many different types of programs in so many locations, and they just need to use data in slightly different ways. But like if I were to actually look at those 9,000 dashboards, probably we could combine them into a much, much smaller list, but it would have to have some nuanced differences. And I think one of the really important things that AI in this tool can do for us is to allow us to create tools that are general, but then let the user dig into specifically what they want and ask the questions and get the data that's really specific and relevant to them. So that's one big piece for me is ways that we can make tools that manage across that huge scope of complexity without needing to build and put all of the work into building that many different individual dashboards. And then the complexity pieces, or sorry, the availability pieces is the other part, which is very related, but there are so many different data sets that feed into just this tool already, and then so many beyond that we use both internal and external. And I've shared this story with the DataKind team before, but a lot of the people in our projects and our operations that I talk to spend all their time in the programs, but then they need to run back to the office and use the computer to see the results from a cash distribution that just happened, or just find some data that they need to inform some of their work. And today they probably have to sometimes drive an hour to get back to the office and go sit at their computer. And if we could put that in a simple to use conversational tool that could be on their phone, let those people get the data they need without needing to go boot up the computer, it's a huge benefit to how we can run our operations. And of course, we can use this in any type of data, and that's one example of a type of data. But just being able to manage and bring the data to the fingertips of the people who need it and that specific information they really want is for me, it's just going to be enormous in actually making the data part of people's day-to-day decision-making processes.
Thanks, Rory. Tam, over to you as well. From you are obviously head of humanitarian evidence learning and accountability at SAVE International, and working very closely with operational teams. What, from your perspective, do you think is motivating you to explore the potential of a solution like this?
Thanks, Tali. So I agree with everything that Roy said, but maybe to give a slightly different angle or something that is, I guess, at the top of our focus for humanitarian. I think there's a few things. One is a lot of our teams are really excited by AI. They really see the potential for it, and they do see that this is the future of where lots of different things are going. And so we're seeing that AI is currently being used in ways that maybe we're uncomfortable about. So I think there is one big component for us is actually how can we ensure that we are investing into an AI that is tackling some of the concerns that we have around security and ethics. And obviously, Save the Children, a big part of our focus is children. And so how can we invest into an AI that is really focusing on some of these areas that we're concerned about? For example, in Save the Children, we're not allowed to use ChatGPT, for example. So for lots of our teams, once you're removing that as an option, we do want to see, okay, well, how can we actually add an alternative? The answer is just not to remove the option because we don't think it's safe enough. We actually do need to think about alternatives. So I think that that's one piece. And then I think another piece is genuinely the capacity concerns. So Tali, you spoke to this a little bit about some of the analysis that you did in identifying what the assistant should focus on. And I think for us, we just continuously have massive capacity concerns in humanitarian context. So sometimes it's at finding people with the right skills, but a lot of the time it's genuinely just people having enough time to do some of the things that we need to do often quite quickly. And so, for example, if we take needs assessments as an example, in Save the Children, we have a time frame of, in a rapid onset, we should have a rapid needs assessment done within 2 to 3 weeks. The workload that generates in terms of actually developing the tools, collecting the data, and then analyzing and producing the data in a way that we can actually interact with and design programs, it's a huge amount of work. So we really see this as an opportunity to at least support us with that piece at the end, with the analysis, the data visualization, and speeding that up in a way that can alleviate some of the workload and the capacity constraints on our team. So I think for me, there are two big ones.
Thanks, Tam. And actually on that, so indeed that we early on articulated that overhead is significant, and if the impact to reduce the overhead and the resources and the skill set it takes to produce those analysis in a timely way, in a meaningful way, if we can actually accomplish that, that would be meaningful impact. Could you speak a little bit about how that saving, if you like, that the time saved can lead to positive impact for the work that you do and for your team members?
I mean, I would say really the core of it is the work that the AI tool can do is not what those experts are there for. Like finding the right data set, putting it into Excel, and we see this in other AI tools we're testing too. It lets them focus on the thing that they're great at, which is figuring out how to drive results for kids and not on trying to find the right data set.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that, obviously I work a lot with our meal teams. That's I guess a big part of my focus. And what we notice is because it takes so much time to do these basic skills when it comes to like actually analyzing the data for maybe reporting to donors or like being able to produce reports after needs assessments, that some of the other bits that we would love to be a much stronger focus, such as quality or being able to have time, for example, to add that qualitative component of what does this actually mean? Okay, this is what the data is saying. How can we actually really have a proper discussion around it? That always seems to fall, yeah, it just seems to come in second place because we have to spend so much of the time on some of these basic components related to like data cleaning, data analysis. So I think for yeah, exactly what Roy said. And for me, it's about focusing on the much more interesting and valuable components and less on, I guess, just getting some of the basics right, which in humanitarian context, everything is more complex. So getting the basics right is quite hard. Anything that we can do to support that just means that we can focus so much more on the quality piece and on some of the interesting components where we would love our staff to focus much more on. And the reality is the sector is becoming, a harder sector to work in. Humanitarian responses are more complex. We have less funding overall. Anything that we can do to ensure that we are doing things more efficiently will just mean that we're able to produce better quality work and help our staff focus on what we think is the most important part.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Tam, for that. And obviously, we see the potential here. We've talked about it, and there's the impact is meaningful in order to bolster the sort of scope and impact and effectiveness of the response activities. But when it comes to actually, operationalizing an AI solution at your organization, maybe Roy specifically, what are some of those considerations that you have top of mind when it comes to, right now we have the prototype, we are thinking about making it production grade, deploying it, and then scaling it across SAVE. What are some of the considerations that you have at top of mind for that?
Well, I would say usually, regardless of the solution, the hardest part is scaling it. And part of that is managing cost. Part of that is driving the change in the understanding by the users. So that includes things that don't include AI, of course. I do think that this solution helps a lot with some of those specific challenges. Like when I think about scaling and driving change while managing cost, there are other solutions that I think exist, like from other vendors or from vendors that can automate data analysis using LLMs, but involve much more heavy LLM calls. And the model that we've adopted here, using the recipes and the memories, really minimizes the volume of tokens, so that we can much more effectively scale this across the organization and manage the cost. So there's a lot of, I think, benefits of AI in those, but of course AI has its own challenges. And from what we've seen in testing this and other tools, there's a lot of education that's needed to help users understand what they can get, what they can't, and how to get the best out of the tool. And so, like some of what we saw in the demo today, the way you phrase a prompt can really change the outputs you get. And something that we've seen from users is a subset get it right away and get a ton of value, and then another subset don't see the value immediately and then stop using it, and then that's of course a big loss for us. So I think it is the same challenges we see everywhere, and how do you get 20,000 people to, or however many are relevant to each solution, but for us 20,000 total staff to understand what the tool is when they're working in such challenging contexts, like Tam said, but I think that the value here and the sheer time savings for the staff that are going to use it is what's going to enable us to drive that change.
Amazing. I want to thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives. I'm going to move quickly forward. I did want to just quickly, Tam, did you have anything to add on that as well? Because I know you have also been thinking about the considerations from the perspective of skills that are required, and the sort of evolution of skills that are required when you bring in new technologies. Do you want to say a couple of words about that before I move on?
Sure. I think the skills and the evolution of skill required speaks a little bit to what Roy was saying about what capacity we might need and how do you actually, I guess, get buy-in and then the right skills in place. I think the only thing I would add is maybe a piece around maybe a fear. We haven't tested this as much, but with the use of AI, especially in humanitarian contexts, we are aware that there might be an initial trust of the analysis straight away, because we don't have much time, because this is making things easier. So I think for us, one thing we really would like to focus on is not only how do you build some of those hard skills of how to do prompts in the right way and how to get the best out of the AI, but how do we also ensure that we're really building a culture where we interact with AI in a critical manner. We're not just trusting it immediately. We're recognizing its value and speeding things up, but we're still being careful and making sure that what it is producing is correct. And I think that will take a specific nuance in the way that we roll this out, because it's much more about culture and the way that we're interacting with something. It's less around hard skills, which from experience always seems to be the trickier piece to get in place. So I think that's another big factor that we we'll need to think about as we roll things like this out.
Thank you, Tam. Really valuable point. And actually, that has been really the core reason behind creating some of those badge systems, to encourage more of that sense of, okay, this result has been reviewed, or the way this analysis is produced has been reviewed by a human. However, check, do you get the result that you intended? Is the map actually of the country that you're looking for? I have found this. I was actually hoping to show you an error like that in the demo, but it will come up when you try it. There are just a few of those quirks that do happen. I'm just going to revert back really quickly now to the presentation. Thank you, Roy and Tam, again for your perspectives here. What I just want to, just to look ahead in the short term, I just want to share with you all that, we are really excited to get this prototype of the Humanitarian AI Assistant in your hands, and we're looking forward to getting your feedback. There's a lot that we can learn from your feedback, as we think about what improvements we can make, but also as DataKind, we are eager to continue to expand this solution and other solutions within our Humanitarian Data Insights project through the addition of more public data sources, expanded, data recipes and user training, and really start to provide this as potentially a public good or a public service. We are eager to see if that does sort of make sense and add value. And in the near future, we're of course also looking for that engagement with our stakeholders, with institutions across the humanitarian community, to understand exactly how we need to develop the humanitarian AI assistant and the data recipes AI concept to make it what it needs to be in order to support, user understanding, like Tam mentioned, engagement, and then adoption of the tool in day-to-day workflows and get to the impact that we're seeking. We really want to make sure, of course, also to continue to adapt and evolve and ensure there's alignment of this technology with institutional policies and overall guardrails and guidelines that are there to uphold humanitarian values and principles. Now, with that, if you are ready to give it a go and try it, here's the URL. It's hdip.datakind.org, and you can get in there and have a go. I also just want to make a quick note before I come to a Q&A part of the webinar that you might wonder, okay, this is great for a demo. You have a public data set from HDX on there, but what if I want to deploy my own instance of the humanitarian AI assistant and maybe plug in my own data? Well, you can. As I mentioned, one of the objectives of our project was always to ensure that everything that we develop is open source. So everything that we have done is available in a GitHub repository and runs as a Docker application. It contains, if you're so inclined to do that, you can just go ahead and use the QR code to have a look. But it contains components, ingestion, the data storage piece, the actual chain-lit chat interface that we've used in this prototype here, as well as the command line interface that you need as a recipes admin. So the group that's actually sort of generating the recipes and then pushing those out to a front end for end users. It is, like I said, open source, MIT license. So any humanitarian organization or any private individual as well, you can deploy it locally and it can exist within your infrastructure. The security will depend on the security of your infrastructure. So, for more information about that, I would recommend to check out the FAQs. So with that, I'd like to close out the presentation again with a huge thank you to the many, many contributors who have been really instrumental in shaping the Humanitarian AI Assistant. We really couldn't have come this far without you. So again, thank you very much. And I'll stop here and come to questions. I haven't actually been keeping track of the Q&A, but maybe I'll ask my colleagues if they have seen any trends in questions that they'd like to speak to or acknowledge as you've seen comments and questions come through. All right, I might invite, let's maybe to put you on the spot, our Vice President of Technology, Larry, if you're around. Hi. I was curious if you have observed any questions from the audience so far that you might want to just offer some comments on.
Yeah, I was busy typing away, so sorry for the silence trying to answer in the Q&A. We will, for those who we don't get to your questions, the typed answer, I believe we have a mechanism that we can follow up. So we will get you an answer if we aren't able to do it in this session. I think there's a lot of questions about the importance of the quality of the data going in. And so for the purposes of the demo, we are using the HAPI API. Part of that is, it is a nice, clean, organized data set that we can pull in. We have done some exploration of using LLMs to actually prepare data. So there was a part of this project where we did explore the use of LLMs to actually take some of that unstructured data and some of the more difficult data and use LLMs to organize it in order to be consumed by the agent for the data recipes. And that's something we hope to continue to explore, is the viability of LLMs to actually do some of that data preparation and to understand what some of that data is, especially when we're talking about something like HDX, where we have data sets that are stored in multiple formats across multiple years, and there's no consistent schema. So that is something we'll continue to explore. So I know there are a number of questions about quality of data going in. If you do your own, your own implementation locally and you use some of your own data, it's something we'd like to hear from you too, is what your experience is in that data preparation, and what type of results you're getting when you're using your own internal data. What is the cost of doing that preparation, or can you use it pretty much as is? Because that'll help us guide maybe some of our research into that data preparation piece. So that's one piece that is one theme that I saw. Other themes that we saw was, a little bit more about how the actual recipes work under the hood. I think in both the Q&A and I believe in the chat, we've posted some of the blogs that were written along development of this tool that kind of explore the thinking of using multiple LLMs. The original concept really being using the more cost-intensive LLM to create the raw recipes, and after the recipes are created, using the cheaper LLM to actually run those recipes and to deliver the answers. So there's quite a bit about the architecture. So happy to refer people to either, if you can't find the links in the chat or the answers, contact us and we can send out some of that reading if you'd like to dive in deeper. So those are two that I noticed, Tali, was the quality of the data going in and the actual under the hood use of the LLMs. And there's quite a bit of reading we can get out to folks about who want to explore that.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Larry. I'm actually plugging in again we have a series, all the learning that we've done along the way in this project. Our head of data science at the time actually really just helped to capture all of that in a series of blog posts that we have out. And the one I'm just putting into the chat now, again, it has been shared earlier as well. This really starts to dive into that data recipes concept. It's based on something called language as a tool maker, as the underlying foundation of this. And so this gets really into the details about not only how you use LLMs to assist in writing the code, something that I think we're all doing a lot now with Copilot, for instance, but then also getting it to a point where using a sort of command line interface, how you can actually check and verify the way the code has been written, and then give your approval, your seal of approval as the expert or the data expert before it is pushed out. More other learnings around things like how do we operationalize LLMs are also in a series of blog posts, which if you go to our website, you will be able to access them there as well. When the recording goes out and also when the presentation goes out, I will add an additional side with all of the links and resources for you. Okay, thanks again, everyone. We are at time, and I really just want to thank you for taking the time out on a Friday, morning, early morning in some cases, and late at night in other cases, really for joining us for this launch of the Humanitarian AI Assistant. Please do log in, have a go, try out some of those recipes, and let us know what you think. We're really looking forward to your feedback. Thanks again.